part two of Johann Hari's reflection on why we struggle focusing. What are the causes? So, this video will address his causes 4, 5, and 6. Well, cause 4 is my job, so I have to pay attention to it. I don't know many people, whether they're students or parents or friends of mine or colleagues, I don't know many people who wish they read less. I asked my students in the beginning of the year a series of questions, and one of them is, what can I help you with? What do you need most help with? And a lot of my ninth graders coming into high school will say, I just need to be a better reader. I need to be better at it. I want to be able to read more and have that be okay. And these aren't students that generally have done well in English classes, but they just know that it's something that's important. And most adults that I talk to at social events, once they find out I'm an English teacher, often either nerd out with me about books they love, which is awesome, or they kind of speak apologetically to me about why they don't have time to read. Not that I would ever judge them. But one of the reasons, according to Johann Hari, that we struggle focusing as a culture is that the idea of just sitting with a book and getting lost in it has become just treacherously difficult and nearly impossible for a lot of people. Um, there's a statistic, couple of statistics. As of 2022, 57%, over half of American adults, don't read a single book in a typical year. So they read their phones, but they don't read a book. And as of 2017, the average American spends 17 minutes a day reading books and 5.5 hours on their phone. And I wonder what that is now in 2024. So as an English teacher, this is the context that I operate in, that a good percentage of my students are from contexts where maybe there aren't a lot of books around, maybe. And most of us, adults and students, are on our phones disproportionately more than we're sitting in front of books. So my job deals a lot with handy kids' books and guiding them through them, but also encouraging them to read independently. That's like, for a lot of them, that's like asking them to walk on the moon. So one of the things Johann Hari researched, and he went to various scholars of this to think about it, is what is the difference in our brains and what expectations are set in our brains if we read digital screens a lot versus when we read paper books a lot. And I don't know, you might find this interesting. He talked with Anne Mangan, who's a literacy professor in Norway. And for decades, she has researched the differences between reading on screens and reading paper books. And she said that reading paper books trains us to read in a more focused way and allows us to focus on one thing for a longer time. And she says reading from screens, on the other hand, trains us to read differently. And it's in a more skipping from one thing to another. And she says, here's her quote, we're more likely to scan and skim when we read on screens. And this scanning and skimming bleeds over. It also starts to color and influence how we read on paper. And this behavior becomes our default, more or less. Just yesterday, I was reading just some quick stories on the internet about the Boston Red Sox, my baseball team that I'm a fan of, and whether they were going to make any trades before the trade deadline. But the way I was reading the articles, I mean, I would read a headline and quickly determine whether I wanted to read maybe the first couple of sentences of the article. Sometimes they were tweets, but it was just very like looking at the screen, quickly making judgments, clicking, clicking, clicking. I wasn't clicking an article and sitting and reading it for 10 minutes. So if that's how I process text, mostly, handing me a novel and telling me to sit and enjoy it would be really difficult. And I think that's what Mangan is saying here. And here's why this is important. She said the influence of our screen reading, Johann Hari says, creates a different relationship with reading. If that's all we do is read on screens, it actually makes reading different for us. It stops being a form of pleasurable immersion in another world. And instead, it becomes more like dashing around a busy supermarket to grab what you need and then get out again. When the reverse takes place, when our screen reading contaminates our book reading, we actually then lose some of the pleasure of reading books themselves, and they become less appealing. Bottom line is when we read on screens mostly, our eyes are trained to dart around skimming for the information we want. When we read a book, we have to slow down, a paper book, we have to slow down and read word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. A lot of people read Twitter uh, obsessively. So there's a reflection in Hari's book on how Twitter teaches us how to think and read. So there's a few messages that Twitter gives us, and those of you who enjoy Twitter, great. Um, but Twitter communicates a few things. The first thing Twitter communicates is that you shouldn't focus on any one thing for long. There's a reason why there's a limited number of characters you're allowed to tweet, right? They don't want long essays. They don't want long explanations. They don't want arguments and defenses. It's taglines. The second message of Twitter is that the world should be interpreted and confidently understood very quickly. That everything is easily understood. You just need like a quick comment that works. So conservative Representative Jim Jordan tweeted in 2022, canceling student loan debt is stupid. And a few years earlier than that, Bernie Sanders tweeted, cancel all of it. Both of their positions are legitimate, and there's arguments to be made for canceling or not canceling student loan debt. But if you process the world through things like Twitter, you can think that this is just a very simple thing and all you need is the conclusion you like. The reasons to cancel or not cancel student loan debt have everything to do with the complexities of the American economy. And if you're interested in learning about why or why not cancel it, you need to understand the economics of it. It isn't simply the conclusion in a tweet. The third message Twitter gives us is that what matters most is whether people immediately agree with and applaud your little sentences that you tweet. Do you like it or not? Do you love my tweet or not? Right? And if your tweet gets retweeted a certain number of times, you get a certain validation from that makes you feel good. Now, paper books present different messaging to us. So what a paper book message gives to us as a message, the first thing is that life is complicated. And if you want to understand life, you have to set aside some time to think deeply about it. It isn't a matter of recognizing a tweet that agrees with what you already think in one sentence, but that things are pretty difficult. And that's okay. And it takes a while to understand how life works. The second message paper books give us is that there's a value in leaving behind your other concerns and narrowing your attention to one thing, sentence by sentence, page after page. We know this from conversations. This is how we want to be listened to. If you have something really important to tell a friend, you want that friend to listen to every word and every sentence and to follow your reasoning as to why you think what you think. Why wouldn't we want the same thing with books? The third message, and I love this, that paper books give to us is that it's worth thinking deeply about how other people live and how their minds work, that they have complex inner lives just like you. I just finished a book called Convenience Store Woman by a great Japanese author, and it's really just about the inner life of a woman who loves working at a Japanese convenience store. But her inner life is so rich. I was in a convenience store yesterday, and I was just thinking so differently about that experience because I had read that book and I was imagining the life of the person behind the counter. John Green, who's a great writer, writes, writing, or at least good writing, is an outgrowth of that urge to use language to communicate complex ideas and experiences between people. And that's true whether you're reading Shakespeare or bad vampire fiction. Reading is always an act of empathy. It's always an imagining of what it's like to be someone else. I think every school committee, every school administration, every parent, and probably a lot of kids wants to make their inner lives bigger, wants to be fascinated by people and how the world works. According to these studies, paper books is the way to enable that. All right, cause 5 of our struggles with focusing, the disruption of mind wandering. And this is a little quote from my favorite comedian. Check him out. Oh my gosh. I was trying to daydream, but my mind kept wandering. We think of mind wandering as bad, right? It's bad. Focus. We think of mind wandering as the opposite of focusing. But watch this. So here are a couple of definitions. Attention, which is what we're talking about, is a person's ability to selectively attend to something in the environment. In other words, attention is a choice, right? And mind wandering isn't just simply spacing out, it's the spontaneous flow of thoughts that don't relate to a job you have or a task you have. You're out walking in the woods, you choose not to be listening to things on your earpods, and you notice like a really orange leaf, and that reminds you of a dress your grandmother used to have, that orange, which then reminds you of your grandmother's meatballs. And then it just fills you with this memory of your grandmother who passed away 2 years ago, but how lucky you were to have her in your life. Like all of us have had those moments where we just quiet our mind and respond to the environment, and let our thoughts flow. So Nathan Spring and Jonathan Smallwood had this interesting research question. What happens when our thoughts flow freely without any immediate focus to anchor them? What happens when our thoughts float freely without any immediate focus to anchor them? And I want to say, too, as a teacher, I don't know how good a job we do to encourage this. I think teaching now can so easily be just a set of adult orchestrated tasks that students either do or don't do. But how often do we just have students, maybe read something or think about something and then give them some time to think about it in a sort of free form kind of way? How often do we do that? Do we worry that we can't grade it so we don't do it? I don't know. So here are three crucial things that happen during mind wandering, that if you're interested in reading better, thinking better, and being more creative, these are essential. So first, when your mind wanders, you're slowly making sense of the world. I know that example about the orange leaf that I just gave was a bit weird, right? But I don't know, isn't it cool that you could wander around the woods and just kind of relax your mind, and you can move from the beautiful color of a leaf on a tree to being grateful for your grandmother, and you start realizing how connected things are? I think that's really cool if you're able to do that. Secondly, when your mind wanders, it actually starts to make new connections between things, which can produce really interesting ideas and sometimes solutions to your problems. Any teacher reading this knows that at some point, doing well in school is more than about avoiding mistakes. I'm an English teacher, so at some point, if you're going to write an essay on Pride and Prejudice or Hamlet or The Odyssey or Beloved or, I don't know, name a book, it can't just be telling me what happens in the book. You have to quiet your mind and notice the deeper things happening in the book, how characters are motivated, how characters respond, the relevance of important silences, how the structure of a building is the reflection of the structure of the person living in the building. You have to quiet your mind to just let your mind discover these connections. And third, when your mind wanders, your mind will engage in mental time travel when it roams over the past and tries to predict the future, therefore helping you prepare for it. Um, I think this is self-explanatory. But the big thesis with mind wandering is it doesn't contradict or go against the idea of focusing. It's actually an essential part of it. And I don't think adults right now, whether they're parents or teachers, I don't think we look at it that way enough. So I think the key is to rethink what being productive means. That book that I reflected on earlier, How to Do Nothing, digs really deeply into this. If you ever see someone going for a walk and sort of just talking to themselves or just looking at birds, or you see someone sitting on a bench just kind of reading a book of poetry or a work of nonfiction they're interested in, or someone just sitting listening to music and not doing anything else and just letting their imaginations go, I think our society looks at that as sort of indulgent, like, what, you don't have anything to do right now? Um, or just like sitting having coffee with someone you care about without any agenda for hours, and just telling yourself, I'm only going to get up when they get up. If they want to sit here for 3 hours, I'm doing that. Um, Letting our mind wander isn't wasted time, right? Really important. And then last but not least, our last struggle with focusing, as indicated by Johann Hari, is that the rise of technology that can track and manipulate you. This is where it can get a little, you can get a little paranoid if you're not careful. This movie, The Social Dilemma, which is a documentary, is must see. So there's an early investor in Facebook that Hari interviewed, and he said, "How do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible?" That was one of the goals of Facebook. How do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? So there's a really interesting reflection on page 110 of the origins of Instagram. And it started with seasonal affective disorder, that when it gets darker for longer periods of the day, some people have sort of accelerated kind of depression because it's darker. So Tristan Harris started this app where a person who's feeling kind of down can connect to friends who are maybe in more bright, well lit, sunshiny environments. And those people could like share little sunshine icons with them. And it gave them a little jolt. That ended up shifting and changing into what we have as Instagram, where you can like put a heart next to posts you like. Um, so here's what Google executives tell us. So if anybody's going to know how the internet works, here they are. The longer you make people look at their phones, the more advertising they see, and the more money Google gets. I think that makes sense. I think even young people realize how many commercials there are both on the internet and on television. So if if Google is able to get you to look at your phone, or a large group of people to look at their phones for 8 hours a day, advertisers are going to give Google more money because more eyeballs are looking at their advertising. And Tristan Harris warned his colleagues at Google that the internet was designed to put people on a treadmill of continual checking, right? Put your phone away. See if you can put your phone away for a work day or a school day or even like just dinner time, right? See how that goes. Here's the interesting thing that I didn't know about, which is a lot of things. Old internet pages and the current infinite scroll. Conservative estimates argue that adding the infinite scroll feature leads to people spending over 50% more time on sites like Twitter. When the internet was newer, you would be scrolling and then it would stop and ask you if you wanted to continue. And sometimes you didn't. You're like, I've been on for 20 minutes. That's good. It doesn't do that now. It scrolls infinitely. And that's on purpose because, as I said earlier, the longer we're on, the more advertising dollars things like Google get, and it's money. So this Harvard professor, Shoshana Zuboff, reflects on surveillance capitalism. And this is somewhat scary. But as we know, we get, texts and emails depending on where we buy things and the websites we visit. So if I was searching for like help sleeping, I might get messages like this. If I buy donuts at a local shop, I get messages like this. It's not evil in and of itself, but it's what she calls surveillance, people checking on you, capitalism. How do we make money off of me by knowing what I want, what I search for, and where I go? And the consistent premise of the internet, according to Hari, is that it shows you things that will keep you looking at your screen. And we know this to be true. So something that I think it's good to know, even if you're one of my freshmen, I just want you to know this. There are large companies with very smart people studying us very intently on how to keep us on our screens. So how do they do that? So there's a New York University study that suggests that for every word of moral outrage you add to a tweet, your retweet rate will go up by 20%. And the words that will increase your retweet rate the most are attack, bad, and blame. Okay, so you want to keep people on the internet, you want people to be attracted to what you write, be as outwardly angry as possible, right? Okay, hopefully these 6 causes of our struggle with attention made sense. I think some of them will apply to us individually, some apply maybe less. I don't use Twitter, so this last slide doesn't affect me personally in the same way as it might affect someone who uses Twitter a lot. But hopefully knowing the causes of why we struggle with our attention can help us be better at it. So good luck.